Over to you, Shri. Namaste and good afternoon, everyone. I am Shri Kapoor, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi. Extend my heartiest welcome to you all to this IMPRI hashtag Web Policy Talk. Today, we are here for a hashtag Web Policy Talk on Environment Justice Challenge for Environment Regulation in India by Ms. Kanchi Kohli. This discussion is a part of a special talk series, hashtag Local Governance, with Shri Tikender Singh Panwar by IMPRI Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies. We are very grateful to have Mr. Tikender Panwar to moderate the session. Sir is the former Deputy Mayor at Shimla and is a visiting senior fellow at IMPRI. I would now like to introduce our speaker for today. Kanchi Kohli works on environment, forest and biodiversity governance in India. Her work explores the links between law, industrialization, and environment justice. Her research interests also include the implementation of biodiversity regulations in India. She has authored various publications, research papers, and popular articles. She co-edited the book, Business Interests and the Environmental Crisis. Since 2004, she coordinates an information dissemination service on forest and wildlife cases in the Supreme Court of India. She co-edited The Case for the Commons, which is a 6-part e-publication on the administrative follow-up of the 2011 Supreme Court of India judgment on the protection of the commons. Ms. Kanchi regularly teaches at universities and law schools in India on subjects related to biodiversity, environment, and community development. Thank you for accepting our invitation, ma'am, and welcome. I would like to extend my warmest welcome to all participants and viewers. I now invite Mr. Tikender to give his opening remarks and invite the speaker for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Shri. It was nice to introduce Kanchi and welcome, Kanchi. And it's really nice to have Kanchi here. And Kanchi has already been introduced by Shri. And just to add something that she also writes extensively on environment issues and the recent struggles that are taking place, especially on the issues of Central Vista, Lakshadweep, and the Andamans. Kanchi is quite, and I'm sure that she says and why all this is happening at this moment. I don't think I need to contextualize this discussion because I believe Kanchi will take the floor and then will speak about whatever he wants to, and also contextualize the discussion. But just 4 or 5 quick points that I think which are important for me to mention here. One, that this is a series that we are running called hashtag Local Governance, where we are trying to bring in kind of new discussion with a slightly different paradigm of platform, where we discuss, criticize, and actually also try to understand which way are we evolving, which way are we moving ahead. Though it's hashtag local governance, but we focus more on the urban sector. 5 things I think which are very important before Kanchi speaks, and then I think once she's done, then we can have the Q&As, and then we can wrap up. So I think we should be able to finish off in an hour. So the first thing is, I think it's a really precarious situation as far as our environmental regulation is concerned, as far as the way we are treating treating our environment. And not a big wonder that our performing indices, I mean, the EPI, we rank almost 168 out of 180 countries. So we know where we are. I mean, what to boast of anything else. And just recently, on June 5th, when we had the World Environment Day, there were 3 things that were really pushed forward throughout the globe. One was reducing the carbon emissions. And we know that in the last 30 to 40 years, actually 50% of the carbon emissions have been added to the whole lot of emissions that were there in the past. And just 20 companies are responsible for actually 33% of the emissions. So we should know the interplay of forces, the kind of responsibilities and the kind of issues that are before us. The second thing I think which is important has been mentioned is the fast pace in which we are losing our biodiversity, and I mean, it's literally that many of the species are on the verge of extinction. So what do we do about this? And why is it so inherently important for us as Homo sapiens, as human beings, to actually bring in this connection between the loss of species, the loss of biodiversity, and human beings? And Kanchi, I mean, this is an anecdote that I've been sharing with many of our friends and some of our scientists friends who say, "Don't worry about the loss of species, and if honeybees are lost, then we don't survive for long." But they say, "Don't worry about that. We'll create robotic honeybees." I mean, that's the kind of obfuscation we are also witnessing from a set of communities. So I think so that's important, which Kanchi will definitely talk about, and of course pollution, the third important. But I have added the fourth part, and that is the massive change of land use that we are witnessing. From our forests to denuding our forests to construction of buildings, construction of highways, and the real estate kind of thing that is happening. So I think those four are. I think what is important is when we talk about climate justice, I think I mean, how do we feel and how do we bring in the component of participatory role of the people? We've seen the kind of participation in Lakshadweep. People are put behind the bars, but decisions are taken somewhere else. I mean, those who have protected the forests right through the centuries are now being thrown out of the forest, and this is the kind of justice, I mean, climate justice and environment justice we are talking about. So Lakshadweep, Central Vista, uh, Andamans, just to name, and of course, where you have written extensively the kind of changes that are being brought out in the EIA, the Environment Impact Assessment, also to benefit some of the large coal miners in the country, especially in the northeastern part. So, and the fourth thing, I think, but there's some certain positive parts also. And I mean, who amongst us had thought when we came out from the Paris climate deal that, I mean, US was walking out, now it's coming up with the new Green Deal. And similarly, in England, we find the voices being raised from the political spectrum, not just coming from the Greens, but even apart from them. That those who do not adhere to climate change cause to climate change adaptability, then I think they should be forbidden even from trading in the stock exchange. Though it sounds quite totalitarian that way, but yeah, I mean, those voices are also being witnessed. So there is some positive. And lastly, I think, Anchi, when I say, I think what is also important is that this struggle can't be reduced to mere reductionism. Just I think so. We have to understand the interplay of forces. We know how the interplay of forces is taking place in the Central Vista, at Lakshadweep, and of course globally. So building those struggles, building those networks, building those alliances, if we have to survive, because after all, it's a question of our survival. So over to you, Hanchi. I mean, I will not intervene in between. So just go ahead, take your time. And then, of course, Arjun is already there with questions and whatever is there in my mind, I will. So, and of course, we have a good number of participants who will be joining here and also on the Facebook who will take all those questions. Over to you, Hanchi. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tikender. Thank you, Arjun. Thank you for IMPRI for having me here for this discussion. I think Tikender has laid out the context very clearly for everybody in terms of what I might be trying to deal with, or rather, I would say, think through here. Because when I was asked for about topic for this discussion, it could have been only environment justice, or it could have been only environment regulation in India. The challenge of environment justice or the challenge of environment regulation. There was a reason when I thought, let me try and bring this together, because environment regulation is often perceived and seen in today's context. Environment law, policy, regulation is seen as means to ensure environmental protection. and means to ensure that, this, laws and policies are supposed to actually give you good environmental outcomes. So I thought, let's see if we actually bring these two topics together to see whether we, when we're talking about implementation of environment regulation or the design of environment regulation, does it actually, does it actually lead us to environment justice, which is a much bigger political, social outcome that we want out of processes of implementation, laws, policies, and laws, policies, or other kind of governance mechanisms. So that was, I think, in some ways, an exploratory sort of bringing together these topics. What I'll try and do is only for the next 7 to 10 minutes, just try and lay out some of these thoughts and air some of these thoughts, in front of all of you. And basically, for all of us, while environmental issues have been important, in the last year and a half, there have been, I think, while we've been all locked in, there have been some very significant flashpoints with respect to environment regulation. For instance, people have the whole discussion around a draft new law for environmental impact assessment really threw up, the issues of, well, we need to, once again, threw up the issue of, we need to try and, if there is something called that, balance environment and development. Notions of our association with environment and the kind of development we take. This question came up. What also came up was a lot of economic sectors, industries, project proponents saying that environment regulation is too harsh on us. It's slowing down the economy. It's leading to a job crisis. All of that. So, in fact, in many ways, environment and environmental issues, or environment laws and policies, became a pivot around which a lot of these discussions were taking place. Government had took it forward in its own way. Civil society actors were talking about it in its own way. Financial and economic planning people were talking about it in a different way. So this is what happened. But at the same time, visually, what people were experiencing is what is also, to a large extent, also re-engagement with environment, in a different way. We were in a lockdown. We suddenly saw visuals of birds returning to creeks. We saw visuals of a clean Yamuna. We saw, the Himalayas from Saharanpur. Suddenly, people were trying to re-engage with your neighborhood tree. All of that, it was not like it was not there, but this re-engagement happened. At the same time, what we did not see is in many geographies in the country where you had essential services like mining, highway development, all of that going on, the impacts of non-regulation of environment, the impacts of opening up of those essential services, trucks plying with ore, complete lack of oversight, had tripled or 4 times increased the already existing impacts in those areas, because there was no oversight, there was no grievance redressal mechanism that was taking place. So all this was the context. In fact, the last year or two has been as much about understanding whether we've kind of messed up with the environment, so we are seeing cyclones and floods, etc. And whether COVID-19 is actually lab made, or is it a zoonotic. All of those things are very much part of the discussion. So it's in many ways these issues lie at the heart of where we are as a society today. I just step back a little and just basically talk about environment laws and policies, environment regulations were put in place at different points of time in the last few decades, precisely to figure out a distribution of governance powers between state and center. Distribute powers between who designs laws and who implements environment regulation. It was structured for that. It was actually laid out. These things, these laws came into existence to try and figure out what should be prohibited, what should be allowed, what should be prevented, what should be mitigated. All these laws and policies were trying to do this balancing act, between, because it came out of a system saying that we have to look at economic investments. All that is going to happen. Can we actually have post-liberalization in countries? Can we actually have laws and policies which can try and strike a balance, which can try and use science, good science, and democratic procedures to help governments arrive at good environmental decisions? That's all environment law and regulation was trying to do. I'm talking about some kind of, especially the post-90s laws and policies. There are a whole bunch of other kinds of policies and laws on forest management and all those kind of things we don't have too much time to get into, but at least the regulatory space was about bringing this santulan, or this trying to get this balance or whatever. But as we went on with this process, and it was never meant to slow down or stop economic development and the paradigm that any government at any given point of time wants to take forward. As we went along, as the world evolved, as society evolved, as our economic planning evolved, there were two very distinct challenges that have emerged with respect to environment regulation in the country today. And I think it's the case with many other places. One is that of environmental justice. And the other is about social legitimacy. The first, on environmental justice, is basically, the problem is today that both environmentally damaging projects, whether it is dams, highways, mines, port development, whatever you're seeing, whether it's in the all the land use change that Tikender you were talking about, or it's urban redevelopment projects, all of that. Both environmentally damaging projects as well as solutions for environmental management, both are creating environmental injustice. So to take examples of this, if you take, say, most of the urban redevelopment projects that we're talking about, at the center of urban redevelopment projects, you have two big environmental issues, or three rather. There is definitely the issue of air pollution that we talk about, but in many ways, what emotively many people relate to, or ecologically people relate to, or even socially people relate to, is the question of trees, right? We are actually coming up with a whole bunch of redevelopment projects that are going to be in urban areas that are going to be kind of, we're talking about cutting down thousands and lakhs of trees all through, if all those projects have to be implemented. However, those projects are supposed to come up is a given. Now, what does environment regulation do? It lands up giving you solutions. So that project is damaging, but it also lands up giving you solutions which are equally damaging. For instance, they talk about compensatory afforestation, or they talk about transplantation of trees. Now, where do those trees go? Where are they planted? They land up on the Yamuna floodplains. Yamuna floodplains have its own ecology, its own social ethos, its own hydrological cycle. So we are actually, so it's not, in many ways we are creating these injustices while trying to administer solutions. Now you see another kind of thing that is happening all across coastal India and other parts of the country as well. There's something called deep sea pipelines. All over the coast of Gujarat, you will find a policy for laying down deep sea pipelines. What are the deep sea pipelines doing? Picking up all the pollution that is saturating the land side of the coast, put it in a pipeline and put it into the sea. Now, what is happening? All we are doing is moving the injustice that is we are unable to manage on the land. We move it into the sea, and that's the place where there is an ecological problem with it, but there's also the place where fishing communities go for fishing. Routes are disrupted. All those kinds of things are there, but you have to accommodate the polluter. So you are actually moving the impact away. Similarly, there are issues of coal fly ash management, all of those kind of things, which are right now in the discussion. But the other side of the problem is also the issue, and I'll flag this as in many ways, an extension of what we're talking about in environmental justice here, is because what we are seeing increasingly is whether now it's been given, the what do you call the we've got the facade of reviving the economy right now in the post-COVID scenario, etc. Basically, one amendment after the other, one executive order after the other, there are leeways, dilutions to environment regulation. It was already weak, etc. But we say, okay, we understand people are not being able to lay out conveyor belts and all those kinds of things to move material from one place to the other. So you go anywhere, it's okay, we'll adjust it. All those kinds of things. Or for that matter, for the longest, there has been a whole thing about renewable energy is actually a positive thing. And so to set up renewable energy projects, you don't need to take environmental approval. So you have exemptions to sectors, all of those things coming in. But when these projects hit the ground, when they're actually set up, especially large scale projects, what is happening here is, if you don't go through a democratic process of people's participation in, doing the assessments, engagement, all of that, if you don't do that, when the project is up and running, or when you start construction, there is no social legitimacy, because people don't feel part of that decision. And if you've not felt part of that decision, there is an unacceptability of that project, or that economic activity that we have introduced. At the same time, when there is an industrial accident or disaster, as in the case of Bagjan, or as in the case of Vizag, or all of those things, all these issues really, social conflicts really come up in a big way to hit even economic sectors, because you're questioning the manner in which they've lived together. People and the industry have actually lived together. So what is happening right now is that the current manner in which environment regulation is being implemented for the last several decades, but more so in the more recent times, in the last 7 to 10 years, is that environment regulation is almost becoming, a legal tool and a legal fix almost for political decisions. So, like there are some outcomes that are predetermined, so that land use change has to take place in the Andaman Islands, or there is a Niti Aayog report with respect to justifying what should be happening in the Andaman Islands or in Lakshadweep, etc. The outcomes are almost predetermined, or for that matter, coal auctions need to take place. So these things will these are good for the economy, good for the country, kind of thing. So these outcomes are predetermined. Environment regulation has to become the route by which you are actually justifying some of these projects. So there are exemptions. You undo public participation. You give post facto approvals. You say, okay, you read down the impacts. You do everything that is required. And environment regulation almost acts like a fig leaf. It's almost like it becomes like environmentally legitimate on paper, at least. And that environment regulation is part of that political process to make it happen. And that's what we are witnessing in the worst situation right now. And the EI, Environment Impact Assessment Draft EI 2020 flashpoints last year, and the questions that were being raised was basically that you're actually legitimizing something like this. It was not like this, you're the best law in the world, but what you're doing now is even worse than what you were earlier in your design. So I just end by saying that environment regulation has always been a political tool. It's always been its influence, and governments have used it under the influence of national and global economic trends. So it's always fallen in line with that. But the question for all of us right now, and the world that we live in, is that how deep in the environment injustice tunnel that do we want to really go in? And it's really, do we want to undo it completely, or do we want to strengthen it? These are knowing very well that this is a this is not the best case scenario at all. And I think it's important this because the fact also is that lack of regulatory oversight, as much as it is a political tool, lack of regulatory oversight also results in serious, if it's not enforced well, if it's not designed well, serious accidents and social conflicts. And these, these industrial accidents, social conflicts, ecological damage that we're talking about, large tracts of agricultural land just getting devastated because because a coal ash dike in Chhattisgarh or in Singrauli in Madhya Pradesh just breaks, because of heavy rain or because of mismanagement. These are actually very clearly signs of poor governance, and they are not good economic decisions because eventually there is a social impact and social legitimacy question. There is a question of managing and displacing impacts from one place to the other, so you're not really addressing it. And there is a failure of redressal. So when there's a failure of redressal, when you don't have institutions to redress, conflicts are likely to only increase, which is not very great for even the project proponents who are actually implementing these projects, whether it's private sector or public sector. And I'll just end with that for now.
Thank you, Kanchi. I thought you'd speak more, but I don't think we'll spare you with that, and there'll be lots of questions coming up. Just to substantiate what you're saying, but I think also to build in a paraphrase, Kanchi, I don't know whether you'll agree with that or not, but I, who has come from the movements of the working people, in hydropower, especially in Satluj Basin, right after my student days when I became a full-time functionary of the movement, there's something, and if I have to make it more generic, I think I would say it's this drift and steering of more corporatization of governance models, whereby, as you pointed out, you say politics. To me, it's more like accumulation of capital there and more corporatization. And I can cite just one example. When Wangpu Karcham hydropower project was being constructed, 1,000 megawatt. So one of the biggest hints came from the State Electricity Board because, as you pointed out, regulations and security measures, all that was under the ambit of the state agency, State Electricity Board. But the JPs didn't want that, so they took it out from the State Electricity Board and created some very flimsy organization in the state. And mark my words, someday Wangpu Karcham is going to blast. You just go to Kinnaur and you'll find the water is like coming out from the tunnel from various places. So if I have to generalize it, I think that's one of the areas, and they may be cronies, but so how do you look at it? That's one point. They have really been influential into creating of creation of all these either parastatals or loosening the end of climate of environmental regulations or whatever regulations we had, even safety. That's the first thing. If I have to put it in more generic sense, and I think the driving force also came from economy first priority. The second thing, which again comes from my experience from working amongst the tribal communities in Kinnaur, and that is, we just calculated how much potential does a small district. I don't know if it's a large district, but it has a population of 90,000 and has a capacity of generating 9,000 megawatt, 8,000 to 9,000 megawatt of energy, and in monetize, if you monetize it, it's almost 10,000 crores. So 10,000 crores, what is my share? For a population of 1 lakh. So, if I have to understand in that redistributive phraseology, then, where do you put the local communities? That's why hashtag local governance. So we had certain laws. If the project is not approved by the village panchayats, by the community, but then all that was sidestepped and rather trampled. So, can you just foresee something of that sort apart from what we are witnessing in the EIA which is like more corporate, more for this what I call capital accumulation. Uh, so can the local participatory governance, if we really push for that, reclaiming their rights in these projects, and as you said, good science or bad science, I don't know what does that mean, but yeah, I can understand what you're trying to point out. So I think, yeah. So I mean, just to bring in that local governance concept, and I've seen, I mean, though there are charges against that in that local governance context, people demand more than what they're supposed to. I don't buy that argument at all. But because after they are the ones who lose their land, I mean, who lose their identity. For example, Nagpa Jhakri project, one of the uh, one of the largest hydropower projects that we constructed, 1500 megawatt, some 25 years ago. Now that Nagpa village is gone. So that's why they were very clever enough. Instead of NJP, Nagpa Jhakri Power Corporation, they turned it to Satluj Jal Vidyut Nigam Limited. So let's not keep Nagpa Jhakri. So Nagpa is gone, I mean, because they had to be rehabilitated. So yeah, I think, but thank you so much for making those important points. I think, Arjun, over to you, Arjun. Are you there? Or Kanchi, how do you want to address? I mean, you want to take questions one by one, or maybe all uh, accumulating together?
Maybe a pool of questions, and then we can. I think that would be useful because.
Arjun, you want to add?
Yes. So let me quickly ask few questions, and I will go from the international context only. So as we are into the pandemic, and all the international bodies are revising their estimates of economic growth, and obviously the economy needs to bounce back. So there is, I would say, now much more focus on the economy. Having said that, I will flag two major schemes, which is very relevant. Then one was the experience of One Belt One Road, OBOR, or what is called BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. China has been really able to do so much so that now I am also arguing that they are exporting urbanization other than manufacturing, infrastructure, and other projects. How are you seeing the development of China across the world, especially for environmental ecosystem? And taking a cue from that, we have also got a lot of fund under AIIB, and now we have something called National Infrastructure Pipeline, almost 10,000 projects, investment of $2 trillion, more than 1 crore of investment, and those things coming. Other than that, there are also, but it includes many of them, Bharat Mala, Sagar Mala, so many of things, cluster, Delhi, Mumbai, Amritsar, Kolkata, so many of things are coming. And the pace and MIS data, which the things are coming, that's really moving in a very different direction. In international context, I will also like to mention two specific things, especially for this year. One was Biennial Update Review 3, which will be submitted by India. Earlier, we have submitted 1 and 2. And how do you see what is the BUR3? Our ministry has also come up, and in the COP26, which is just upcoming, almost all the environmental targets we have achieved, what our government is claiming. How do you see this? And what are your views about the service level benchmarking of any of the infrastructural or other projects? Because we are discussing here about local governments, of course, but for many of these projects, the environment clearances and other things also take from a quasi bodies or special purpose vehicle or parastatal. So how do you see the governance, especially from the local governance point of view? I think I will limit myself for this international domain and come with the next set of questions. Kanchi ma'am, over to you.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to try and pull out some threads from the whole variety of points that Tikender you raised and which Arjun also raised. And I think I'll try and respond to it, because I think there were some threads that were very clearly emerging from both from what he was talking about internationally, as well as what you were talking about in terms of local governments. And in fact, that is the entire range of things that we need to understand. What transpires is in a sphere which is so far removed from the local, and yet has such a strong bearing on the local itself. And I think that's from that point of view, I think when you were talking about this issue of local governance, where is local governance? I mean, where there are some laws which have a pool of laws that actually have a bearing on land use change, water, air, trees, forests, all of those parameters when it comes to putting any of these projects, whether it's infrastructure pipeline or it's a port or the dams that you were talking about. There are a whole bunch of laws that are completely opaque. So there'll be absolutely no space for local governance. There are laws where the government actually gives a space for participation, so a space for consultation, where this is your limited space. You come in, say your bit. It's up to us to figure out as governments to decide whether the local is of relevance or the local voice is of relevance, or we need to actually go through with this irrespective of local voice. And because it's of national interest or it's coming from an international kind of trend. And then there are laws which are more recent, which actually draw from the constitution of the country, which are more consent driven. So you cannot do this without asking, without our permission. And some of the panchayat laws or laws related to land acquisition, which have also undergone a lot of changes, or forest rights, all of those things actually give consent powers to the local. So you cannot proceed unless and until the local is either in agreement or the local is bypassed. So all those kind of things are very much part of it. And I think that is what that becomes very crucial when we are talking about how the local is understood and managed in the configurations that operate in any given point at any given point of time. So whenever at the international context, when India is trying to get a competitive advantage over China, or a competitive securing of territory against another country, a lot of those motivations are also very much part of the rush to grab land, assert, securitize, territorialize places. That is very much part of the economic project. So even if we are talking about building a good, strong economic infrastructure that is more that is ecologically conscious or socially just, if you're in the rush, if what is driving us is a competition which does not take into you're trying to meet the same reach the same results as another country would, whether it's China or any other country, then some of those countries don't have the democratic procedures that we have in this country. We don't have the history of how we associate with laws and policies in this country. So all that has to be given up. And if you have to give that up, all the projects, in fact, Arjun, when you're talking about the infrastructure pipeline with the Bharatmala, Sagarmala projects, we cannot actually, and I think that's where the roadblocks and that's where the problems and conflicts are coming up, is that we cannot implement them in thinking that we are implementing them in empty spaces. They are, when you start constructing some of these, even if you've taken all the permissions, etc., there is litigation, there is protest. Even if that fails, then when you're building it, there are landslides. Chardham project is constantly, there are landslides that we're talking about. Port development, people now also understand that you're going to completely lose your fisheries livelihoods when port development is taking place. So many of these economic motivations are not necessary. I mean, I don't even know. I don't even think they are good economic decisions, because the manner in which consolidation, the accumulation of wealth, or the consolidation in the hands of a few big economic actors, that's not distributive in nature. And I mean, if it's not distributive, then we are going to have all the problems that we are having right now in terms of being cash trapped, being, where the consumer sentiment is completely shaken up. All of those kinds of things are because people are not secure in this situation, and the security that people had with respect to food, nutrition, livelihood, cultures, that is something, whether it's a NAFTA village that gets disappeared, or what we are seeing. In fact, the reactions that we're seeing in Lakshadweep right now is in many ways also responding to some of those things. So I don't know if I've been able to, wrap my head around some of the questions you guys raised, but this is what is really coming up. And I mean, the question of monetizing environment has been a huge area of, in fact, some of the discussions that we've done in the book, Business Interests in the Environmental Crisis, is about that monetizing environment has been seen as, by a lot of economists, as a situation, or ecological economists as well, earlier on, as a manner in which you can give environment its value, so that way you'll be able to protect it. But that has not worked, because people have been, if there's more profit from extracting from a place than actually securing that place, the odds don't play up really there, and investors are able to pay for that damage and move on.
Right. Let me come back to one related question. So, ma'am, as you mentioned, there has been many positive sides also coming, legislation, rules, other things also coming. One of them is bylaws, the revised bylaws, which every state government is making for construction and others. And in recent time, we have seen that, be it solid liquid waste management, STPs, and in Motor Vehicle Act also scrapping, e-mobility, so many things coming. In construction also, we are having a lot of rules, green buildings, for major RERA is also having some lever, or be it forest protection, air pollution, so many of things are keep coming. But ma'am, my question was that how do you respond when you see the government is only the primary breaker of their rules? And how do you feel about the attitude of judiciary and bureaucracy when it's like a rampant breaking of the rules or the positive side, so the gains are not materialized? How do you see this conundrum in India, and what are your feelings?
I see it like any other citizen would see it, I suppose. I mean, it's if you have institutions who you are to trust to be able to administer justice, if you have enforce compliance, prevent damage, secure your future, if you don't see those institutions respond to it, leave alone as an environmental researcher, as a researcher in this country, you would, or as a citizen of this country, as a person who just moves from one place to the other, you would hit your head and you say, okay, where there are these laws and policies that are in place, these are the low-hanging fruit. Actually, this is not even big asks that we are talking about. In fact, waste management laws have their own politics. And because from the environmental justice point of view, in fact, some of the places that we are working in the country, we realize that waste management laws are perpetrating huge amounts of environmental injustice, whether it's waste to energy projects or it's locating landfills. Because all the urban kachra, urban waste, all the urban consumption of our lifestyle is just moving into into a village area or into an area where it's in where there's a religious minority or a low caste community that is staying. So those locations are huge problems and huge environmental injustices. Or for that matter, all the occupational hazards that workers face in factories. I mean, these are, you might have a whole bunch of laws, policies, and regulations, but some of them in themselves are a problem, and others, if you completely don't, if there's no oversight and there's no regard for it, we're only finding more instances of profit maximization and not being able to address what is even very basic requirement in environment regulation. I'm not even saying these are big requirements in that sense.
Actually, I just need to, because when she said, I mean, I'm glad Kanchi mentioned, dumping some minority people. I mean, I recommend everyone to watch Netflix series. I don't know whether still is existing there. It's called Layla. And it's a brilliant work by, I don't know who created it, but what could be our future if we don't wake up? And exactly what Kanchi is saying. Of course, it has many political discourse also, but very very interesting. Yeah, please. I think there are questions there.
There are questions there. Should I read some of them?
Please.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Great. So Jasmine Singh is asking question, what is your take on deferring implementation of pollution norms on coal-based power plants? Aren't we paying huge health costs beside the ecological damage due to these plants? One question has also came in chat box. That is also the same question there in Facebook Live. And Santan Das is asking, it's frustrating to see the stark ignorance and at the same time stubborn arrogance among policymakers, administrators and their advisors with respect to accounting for natural capital and essential ecosystem services in their decisions. Positioning environment against development should have obsolete by now. Science in this domain has long cleared as misinformed dispute. As a youngster, it feels that our older generation seems to languish in their outdated economic ideas and refuse to open their minds to environmental economics and environmental justice. Does the speaker agree with this inference, or am I being cynical? So I think that's also a very valid question, because how do we see the younger generation and the older generation looking at this aspect as priority? Ma'am, do you see any divergence among them? And let me also brief all the questions together. Dr. Deljana is an expert in Manchester, and she is terming this as trajectories of violence of our system, especially the environmental justice which you are seeing. Ma'am, how to break this business as usual? Do we have some bad practice, good practice? How do you see the road ahead?
Okay, I mean, the first question is, obviously there is a problem with the emission norms not being adhered to. There are constantly, I mean, the big discussions are happening. My problem with that whole discourse right now, I mean, and it's highly technicalized. Although I do understand that the emission norms, if they're adhered to, they will significantly reduce the pollution load in places. But that conversation needs to have people who are facing these impacts on a daily basis. That is not there. So the deferring is definitely an environmental justice issue, because the deferring is not just a technical or a legal matter or a financial matter. It is daily, breathing of fugitive dust or polluted air by people living in and around these areas, and all the problems. I mean, this is thermal power plants actually contribute. We've actually brought ourselves to this situation through our, the manner in which both economic and environmental policies have been framed and implemented. In terms of cynicism, I can be extremely cynical at different points, at various points of time, very despondent, especially when it comes to how we are even approaching the environmental question, despite huge amounts of catastrophes and facing damage on a regular basis. Uttarakhand floods happen on an annual basis. It's not. These are not one-time disasters. These are all human-induced, human intervention-induced disasters. Because while floods might be happening, the manner in which we've gone ahead with weakening our hills or weakening our coastal areas, this is very much part of that entire process. So as much as I feel cynical, I don't think we have choice. If you want to be part of responding to where we are right now, I don't think we have a choice but to move away from that cynicism and deal with these kind of questions on an everyday basis. So I mean, grounding yourself in certain issues, actually responding to it, understanding it, all of those things actually really help in a way to deal with that cynicism. And while I'm not in disagreement with what you said at all. And what was the third one? Trajectories of violence. Yeah, I suppose it is. I mean, there's no disagreement on that at all.
Right. So one more question have come. Tikender sir, would you like to ask anything? one question Anirudh Theke ji is asking, that there is a huge interest and activity in the carbon credits program and sustainable development goals with inflows of capital. These inflows are rarely rooted to grassroots project. Instead, they mostly hinge on CSR and afforestation project, which indiscriminately look at the plantation, right? Is there an agency or monitoring or watchdog of this inflow of capital, and how they can be better matched to grassroots program? Let me also add one very important question to ma'am. In this pandemic, what the advanced countries or economies are doing, that they are financing their COVID crisis or their socio-economic, be it furlough scheme or be it any other, through green bonds. You must have also seen the Economic Times of India, 2 pages, 4 pages, come and invest in UK in our green bonds and other things. How do you see the financing of this part really essentially going? Should we also have some green bonds for green infrastructure financing, or how do you see to move ahead, especially for the local government? Because we have been also trying to do some urban related municipal bonds and others. How do you see the funding requirement, which is essentially become very important and important? And whenever we are talking about environment, it's just like, volunteering or that thing, how to strengthen the financial architecture of it also.
I mean, many of us who are working on environmental justice issues, I think, and relate to this, we have actually been a little more, I would say, skeptical, but our research has shown that financializing solutions, especially from the environmental point of view, has not worked. So, you might have big collection of pollution cess in the country. Because you pollute and you pay, or the polluter pays thing. You might have big collection of money because of destruction of forests. It cannot in any way legitimize, it lands up legitimizing a lot of the destructive projects, but even if it flows back, or for that matter, the big huge fund that we are talking about is the District Mineral Fund, which is operating in mining areas. These are all collections for, flowing back into the places that you have that might have been destroyed. Now the only problem is that there is an ethos that these projects actually destroy. You change that. These projects are these interventions in the areas are actually disruptive. So in their design, that's why you need to step back, and in your design you need to be very clear about how you're actually planning for accommodating the local ethos. And that's because we're talking about local governance. These conversations are very important because you're actually replacing it. And then money is actually given to be able to either compensate for that or bring in, in mining areas, some of the mining areas, what we've seen is huge stadiums have been built when you've actually lost forests. So now, it is one person's version of a good life versus the other, right? It's but these debates we don't have when we are discussing collection of carbon credits or compensatory afforestation fund or pollution cess or net present value and all kinds of. Now there's a groundwater conservation fee. In fact, monetizing and financializing solutions has actually emerged as a huge problem currently. So even if you have an agency that regulates it, unless and until we question, or rather we actually debate the purpose of this fund collection, and we debate what we are losing in that collection, those forums don't exist. So I think that it becomes very critical that we do that, and carbon credits have done that. Carbon offsets have actually legitimized whole lot of destructive projects in one part of the world, so that you can actually have RED plus schemes or something like this in another part of the globe, which then actually land up restricting people's access to forests, which is bona fide livelihoods. So there are a whole bunch of injustices that we're displacing from one place and the other because we want to move business as usual. So there's not supposed to be any questioning of that. unless and until we are able to tinker and let's just kind of chip away and try and understand, is this this is how we need to proceed, or everything else has to accommodate the manner in which our economic policy is designed right now and globally.
Okay, great. Arjun?
Sir, if I ask more questions, Kanchi ma'am will lead me. Too many questions.
I think I can share one anecdote here, what Kanchi was saying about green bonds. And actually, and I'm accused of always bringing out this nexus. And I said, you're too obsessed with this, that nexus paradigm. But so am I. I mean, I don't hide that. So even if there's an accusation, I would really love to be accused of that. So I did my fellowship on urban mobility from Leipzig. It's a very beautiful town in Germany. And, very beautiful in the sense that very highly pedestrianized. It speaks about mobility and, lots of cycling. I think 25%, 30% commutes there on bicycles. Then they have those bicycle officers. And then while one of our professors, he was narrating, he was saying, look, we are so strict about, Volkswagen, Euro 5, they had to take back and all the stuff, what we're trying to do now. So, but that's not the irony. The irony happened to be, and the paradox is that Leipzig actually sustains its economy on the manufacturing of posh cars. Then you are reducing your 4 lanes to 6 lanes to 4 lanes, handing over that space to the pedestrians. Then for whom are you manufacturing these cars for? And one of the funniest answers that I got in my lifetime is this professor said, for you in the third world, okay? So, and so when you just try to understand this, now come to Himachal, my state, and you'll find massive 4-laning taking place. We are using people to buy cars instead of focusing on mobility. So, and because World Bank happens to be one of the largest funding agencies, and it's almost 30,000 to 40,000 CR that they have invested. Part of that, that's why I brought in that automobile, that sector. So they're still getting those subsidies. So at their place, they would speak something else, but at the same time, so the preach and practice is quite divergent. And you can easily witness, where is that effort, where you are able to reduce your car? Look at the mobility plans, what you have also mentioned. It's all capital-intensive technologies, widening the roads, flyovers and whatnot. So what are we doing? We should know. So I think, but yeah, very well placed. Arjun, is there anything else, or we can thank Kanchi and just?
We are well over our stipulated time also. So if Kanchi ma'am has some concluding words, that's how we should.
It's good. This has been great. Thank you.
Great. So let me just quickly propose a vote of thanks so that we are short and sweet also. So thank you everyone for joining in here and on Facebook Live, and those who will be watching it later on YouTube and on all of our podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcast, Anchor, and others. And we'll also come out with the event report and briefs over the same. So once again, on behalf of IMPRI Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies at IMPRI Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, we thank all of you for joining for this, our special talk series, #Local Governance with Shri Tikender Singh Panwar, and today's deliberation on the topic Environmental Justice Challenge for Environment Regulation in India by Kanchi Kohli ma'am. A very pertinent discussion on this very important topic. I would also request Kanchi ma'am to further participate in some of these technical aspects so that we can learn from her experience. Many questions I have also written on Supreme Court and others, but since Tikender sir works on that a lot, I thought to skip. So thank you everyone, and please stay safe, and thank you. Have a good evening. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.